forget those things.
I do that all the time, and I get so mad when I get 2/3 through the meeting, and I go, "Oh my, I'm not recording."
Well, and Dutch appreciates it when we record it, so we've got that going now. So, Dave Berube, I think I saw you join the call. Are you on? Dave Berube?
Yeah, I'm here, Pete.
Okay, great. So you were asking a question regarding the rear seals in the rear end of your BJ8. So this is the seals that are coming out of the axles. Is that the seals you're referring to, Dave?
I guess so. Yeah, like I said, I noticed a moisture, i.e., some oil-looking stuff at the end of the axle while I was looking at my brake shoes.
Right.
And I think they attributed to my brake shoes getting glazed over. I think it was the moisture. I'm calling it moisture, but I guess gear lube, if it's coming from the axle. It looked like it was coming, like I said, from the rear end housing around the axle. So I'm assuming it's a seal.
Yep. Now, has it contaminated the brake shoes?
Nope. No, I was able to, I scuffed them down with some sandpaper, and it didn't take too much. So they weren't saturated. So I believe they're okay.
Okay, great. So your answer, there's a seal on both of those. You take the axles all the way out, and then there is a paper gasket seal that goes in there, Dave. And so that is, you're right. That's a common places for them to leak. I've had that with a number of my Healeys, so you're not unique for that one.
So I haven't had an axle out. So I think on some American cars, I wanted to make sure there wasn't a pin inside the meatball. I'm going to call it. Nothing really official there, but you know what I'm talking about.
The differential,
holding
the
it
pumpkin.
in the bolts at the I'm going to call it at the plate at the end of the axle. So it is just a matter of taking the drum off and the extension for the wheels, and then there's another set of bolts that actually hold the axle in place.
Yep.
So it shouldn't be more than just taking those out and then pulling the axle out and then putting in that new paper gasket. And then isn't there another seal in closer?
There is that oil seal there, yeah. So does someone want to give Dave a hand with what's the best way to solve his leaking rear seal?
Dave, are you trying to seal the neoprene seal right outboard of the bearing, or just seal the axle to the hub?
No, I guess if I'm gonna do both of them, I guess that would be the best way to do it, wouldn't it?
Right.
To be sure.
So now if you're going in to get the neoprene seal in there by the bearing, you're going to have to take the hub off. And the hub, you'll see when you get the axle out of there, that's held on with a large 8-sided nut, a very thin nut. And one side is a right-handed thread and the other side is a left-handed thread. And there's also one of those bent over lock washers on it. And all of that has to come out. And then the large nut, the Moss sells a special wrench to do it. You probably don't have a proper wrench for it in your toolbox. But Moss does sell it. It looks like a cheap thing from a bicycle kit or something like that, although it's much bigger, obviously. It's just a piece of pipe that's flared at the end with the right size to get on that big nut. And like I said, the other thing you have to be careful of is one nut is right-hand thread and the other is left-hand thread. They should be marked. It'll be marked L or R on the side of the nut, but oftentimes they were put on backwards, or the marking was put on the inside rather than left to be able to see it. Oddly enough, if you look at your knockoffs, you've got a right-hand thread and a left-hand thread on your knockoffs, but the axle nut is actually exactly opposite the knockoff threads. So if you have the right-hand knockoff on one side, the axle nut's going to be a left-hand thread and vice versa. Be careful of that. Now, lacking the big wrench, Some people have taken a chisel and been able to knock it loose just by getting on one of the flats, but that's going to ruin the nut. So probably in preparation for doing it, buy the wrench from Moss. I think it's probably $12 or something like that, and that'll get the nut off. Oftentimes the hub will then pull off without too much trouble, but you may also need a wheel puller to get the hub off. Once you get the hub off, you'll see the neoprene seal. It looks like a modern seal with a little spring on the inside, and that you can pop out with a seal puller or a screwdriver arrangement or whatever. It's just a friction fit in there, and that will pop out. And then you'll see the main bearing there. Usually those are ball bearings. They usually are not difficult, or they are well lubricated with the 80/90 gear lube in the rear end. So they're usually in great shape.
I made some progress tonight. Not
Probably don't have to pull it out.
far from out, but
Excuse me, if you're not speaking, if you wouldn't mind putting your phone or computer on mute. Thank you. Sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
So no need to repack the bearings. They get the juice from the
Right,
from the rear end.
right. They're gonna have plenty of lubrication on them from the 80/90 gear oil that's splashed around in the rear end. And then when the axle goes, when you get all that back together, then the axle just slides in, like Pete said. It's a little fiddly to find the to keep it straight enough so that it goes into the receiver, and then get the gear teeth lined up and keep the screw holes lined up. But it's easily doable. There's a paper gasket there, which you know about. There's also an O-ring, which you're better off buying from Moss, I think, rather than trying to find it at the local hardware store, because it's a fairly large O-ring. It's 4.5 inches in diameter. And there's a spacer, which you want to be careful not to lose when you take it all apart. There's a steel spacer in there. And one screw then holds the axle in. It goes right over the wheel studs. And then when you put your brake drum on and your lug nuts, why, everything's locked together. There is no pin inside the rear end, though.
In the meatball, right, Bob?
Right. There's no pin down inside there.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay, geez, that sounds good.
Okay,
And then-
good luck.
And
Thank
then
you.
Dave, you're also asking about whether to replace the brake cylinders or rebuild them.
Right, I'm familiar with, rebuilding and honing them out after they're done, and, with the new spring and the 2 rubbers. I mean, right, that's pretty standard, but I'm just wondering what the crowd, do they bother to rebuild, or do they just replace the whole
Wheel cylinder.
cylinder? Thank you. Lost the thought on that. Yes. So that's why I asked the question, Pete.
Yep. Anyone have a preference of rebuilding or replacements, and anyone issues with the quality of reproduction wheel cylinders?
I think as long as they can be honed, I think I'd rebuild rather than get some of the junk that's out there as far as replacements. There's been a lot of complaints about junk rear wheel cylinders.
Part of my question to Pete was, okay, where do you get the rebuild kits? Those are pretty common, but then is there a recommended place to get a cylinder that's not junk?
They're probably the cylinders, well, you get the rebuild kits from Moss.
Sure.
Cylinders, I think they're probably all built by the same people. I know Moss sells a gold level. I think they have two levels. That's probably your best choice of a number of choices that probably aren't that great.
You're such an optimist, Rick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
What
what
do
it
they
is.
say about once burned or twice burned or whatever? You know.
Yep. So I guess the recommendation on that is, so Dave, when you take that apart, and if you can see if those wheel cylinders, how they look, and if you can get a rebuild kit, that's probably preferable than taking the risk on some reproduction parts.
Gotcha. But as I was checking my brake shoes, I saw just a little bit of, again, back to my moisture, right around the cylinder, the rubber around it. It's not leaking. I check my fluid regularly, but it looked damp. So it's a matter of, okay, just a matter of time before that bad boy gives way, and then I'm in more of a need. So, okay, question answered.
Well, and you're fortunate, Dave, that you've not gotten the brake shoes penetrated with brake fluid. That can really ruin those shoes. So probably replacing those and getting that cleaned up before, driving the car a lot this spring and summer would probably be a good idea.
That's the plan.
Okay. Anything else, Dave?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great. Well,
Pete?
thank you. Please.
Pete, I would just say that anytime, almost anything you do on a Healey, if you get a chance to rebuild an original, you're better off than buying a reproduction. With almost anything, I'm not sure there's too many parts I could mention that wouldn't be better if you rebuilt the original.
No, I think it's a good point, Rick. That's the problem. If you don't know where some of these reproduction parts are coming from, and they're, it's not the best. So, but in just Bob Abbott, I know you get a lot of things from Healey surgeons. Do you find the quality of things like wheel cylinders that you can get from Enon are better than the used stuff, or do you kind of concur with Rick and his assessment on rebuilds?
I have not had a problem with the stuff I've gotten rebuild. I mean, you only have to have a couple instances where you try to rebuild a cylinder, and because it was so badly scored in the first place, you can't hone it down, but you put it together anyhow, and 2 weeks later, they're back to have them redone. That I just buy new ones. So we just have a difference of opinion if you're doing it. And I haven't had any major problems with the replacement parts that I've been buying. So.
Bob, what kind of brand are you getting from Healey surgeons?
What kind of what?
What brand are you getting from Healey surgeons?
They don't even come with a brand. They're made in Vietnam or China or wherever. That's the only marking you're going to get on them. They probably all come from the same spot. There's probably not that many manufacturers making them, but I've just rebuilt too many of them and had them go wrong. Maybe I'm rebuilding them wrong.
Well, I doubt it. And what I did say was that, you have to make sure that you can hone the ones that you have, that they still look good. And as you said, if you hone ones with ridges and stuff, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. Jack Towle, are you on? Hi, Jack, how you doing? So Jack, you had a question regarding your temperature gauge on your BJA, right? Jack, are you on mute?
There we go. Is that better?
That's better, Jack. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. No, a while back I mentioned that I was having trouble with the temperature gauge. It wouldn't come up. And so I took an infrared thermometer and I put it on where the thermostat is, and I'm getting about 170 degrees there. So it's either the gauge or the sender. So I guess the thing is you have to replace the whole thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's on that multi-gauge or that combination gauge where you got both your oil pressure and your temperature, right?
Correct, yes.
Yep.
So there's none of the components can be changed. It's an all or nothing.
That is correct.
Okay. If you're changing it, you do get involved then with the oil pressure, and that is a copper tube going up there. And how do you have to bleed that when you're all done to get the air out of it, or what do you have to do?
I've never bled. Bob or Rick, is that something you've experienced?
Never had to bleed one. I don't know the process that itself bleeds, but just tighten the ferrule fitting on the back of it from the little copper tube, and I've never had one bounce or flutter or anything like that because it had air bubbles in it. However it does it, it bleeds itself. It's self-bleeding, so it'll take care of any air. that-
So it is full of oil then.
No, it's usually not, but pressure's pressure. It doesn't care.
Okay, all
Thanks,
right,
Kelly.
thank you.
So I guess the other point of reference as it relates to that, so where that sending unit goes into the block, right underneath the thermostat, that is a difficult thing to get a wrench on. So in fact, what I've done is I have taken an old wrench and ground down a lot of the surface to minimize that in order to get that in there. With a standard, Craftsman wrench, it will not fit in there.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So with it, I got an old wrench I had and I think it's a 5/8. Is that right, Bob? Or that fitting that goes into the
If
temper
that
sensor?
sounds right. It's probably either 5/8 or 11/16.
Right. But a standard wrench will not fit in there. And you obviously can't put unless you were to cut the the connection. What I've seen some people do is they have taken a socket and cut a slice in the socket so you can get the that water line through there, that hard water line there to get in there. So I've seen a number of people doing a number of things like that, but it would need to be an open end wrench. A box wrench won't get in there either because of you've got that hard line.
Okay, oh, thank you for that.
If you do decide to cut the socket, cut a slot in the socket, a lot of times you'll need to use a hose clamp around the bottom of the socket to make sure that it grips tightly on the nut.
Okay, so that nut gets pretty tight in there then.
Yeah, it gets really tight.
Okay, and so you're gonna have to drain the radiator then when you take that out.
Yes.
Okay,
It's
Yeah, I'm not sure
self-draining. It's self-draining once you take it out.
we talked several weeks ago about antifreeze. What is the suggested antifreeze to be using now?
Anyway, I use
Peter?
Presto 50/50.
Peter?
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, Dave Maley here.
Hey, Dave.
The heading under my photograph is my wife.
I see that.
In my Model T, I run the waterless antifreeze,
Mm.
and I've had pretty good luck with it. I don't know if anybody here uses it in their cars.
We talked about that several months ago. Someone brought that up, but as I recall, it's pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, it's very expensive.
Right. So someone that brought up that it works really well, but it's probably 3-4 times what you'd pay for antifreeze. And again, I use 50/50.
Yeah.
Premix, but
Okay.
so Jack, have you had that your system drain recently?
Oh, it's been a year or two, yes.
Oh, well, that's not bad.
Yeah, no, that's.
I think you're gonna say a decade or two.
No, wouldn't go that long, huh? Okay.
Okay. So now, so how low is your temperature reading on that?
Oh, it just comes off the peg a little ways, enough that I know that it's doing something.
Okay, so
Uh,
yeah, on one of my sprites runs really hot, but again, I put an infrared thing on it, and so it'll say I'm running at like 190, but you put the gun on it, it says right at the block, it says it's running like 160, 170. So I've just kind of lived with it, knowing that one, just the gauge isn't accurate. It reads high. Yours is just the opposite. It's reading low.
with this, but now Moss has two gauges in their catalog. There's one that's made by Smith and another one that's a Moss gauge. There's considerable price difference. Which one would you get?
Well, the Smith one's the original one, correct? I wasn't aware Moss had two.
Well, they have two listed in the catalog, and there's about a $70, $80 difference between the two sets.
In which is the more expensive, the Smith one?
The Smith was one of them was $219, and that was the Smith was $219, and the one that Moss has listed under their gauges is $299.
Jack, why don't you just have your gauge rebuilt?
Well, how do I know it's the gauge and not the sender?
Well, they're gonna rebuild the whole thing. If you send it down to Neisinger or MoMA out in Arizona or West Valley out in California, they're gonna be, they'll rebuild the whole thing. They'll rebuild and calibrate the oil pressure side of it and the water temperature side of it. And your bulb, the bulb that you're going to, on the end of the capillary tube has like ether in it, so they have to redo that anyhow. So for $1.25, they'll do a rebuild on the whole gauge. And now you don't have to worry about your gauges having an odd name like Moss on it. And the fonts will be right. It'll be the original gauge, just rebuilt.
Okay, good. What's their turnaround time? Do you know? Is it pretty good?
Neisinger is just down in New York, so I frankly, I don't use them, but the turnaround time is pretty reasonable. I mean, it's probably as good as you can, as, you know, except for shipping, it's probably as quick as you can get it, a new gauge out of Moss, especially if Moss is out of it, like they've been at a lot of stuff recently. And
You can pay them. You can
I
pay,
could jump-
they'll upcharge you $65 to expedite it.
What, for Neisingers, you saying?
Yeah,
Alan?
I just had my two. I found out the hard way it's $65 a gauge, but it's they'll
What-
expedite
and,
it.
and what was your turnaround? Because I was going to say it's probably going to be 3 or 4 weeks.
They were quoting me months
Oh.
when I did it. So and it turns out I could have done months because I'm not there yet. But I paid for just to have them turn around, and they built my tack and my speedometer, and they fixed the odometer, and they do a bunch of stuff to it. They turn the tack into a electronic tack, so I can go electronic ignition if I need to. But anyway, the point is that if assuming that they'll rebuild that. That's a dual. Is that the dual one?
Yeah, so the combination gauge.
So
Yep.
they'll give you a quote.
Neisinger's got mine now, and they quoted me 185 and a 3-week turnaround.
Yeah, there you
Okay.
go. That's not bad.
Thank you.
Yep. Good. Thanks for that. So any other questions out there tonight?
Just to get back to the oil gauge thing.
Sure.
I noticed a few weeks back that I started getting some dripping of oil on my left leg. And I figured out it was coming from the copper line going into the gauge. And I talked to Bob about it. And it took me a couple of attempts of wiggling down and kind of cautiously tightening up the nut on it. I was afraid of over tightening it. And I think I've got it. But has anyone else had that nut kind of back off on the gauge? I've never had it in the 49 years I've run the car.
I had that exact same problem with my BJ8, Jim, a couple weeks ago. And I fortunately, it was an old pair of jeans that I'd on, but my knee was covered in oil. And I was initially, it was loose. I'm not sure. I didn't take the gauge out of the car when I redid the motor. But it had backed off, and I was able to get maybe a quarter to maybe a third of a turn on it with a wrench in back there and tighten up, and it has not leaked since.
Yeah, I had to loosen the gauge up to get the wrench on it enough, and then to get it back in level is like a nightmare. And it took me a couple of times, and the second time I had enough wherewithal to have a cell phone with me and call my wife and say, "Is this now level?" And I got it back into the right place. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
So I think
if you're in there underneath, it's a pain. But
you got to get the seat out, and that's why I mean, at this age, to be doing stuff like that is nuts. Yeah.
Well, did you blame Bob stored it all winter for you, Jim? Do you blame him for it?
No, I have no idea how that happened, because I've been running it for about a month, and I noticed like my left leg started showing up with oil stains. So I was like, where am I getting that from?
Yep.
Yeah.
I had the exact same problem 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, weird.
The Moss catalog is showing a leather washer. I've not ordered it, but they're showing a 29-cent leather washer that's supposed to go in that pipe.
Really?
Has anybody seen that?
It goes in that so where the oil line goes in the back of that gauge, you're saying, Michael?
Yes, yeah, that's what they're showing in their catalog.
Okay.
A 29-cent leather washer. I've never heard of a washer being made out of leather, but that's what the Moss catalog is showing.
There is actually a very small washer that goes back there, and they can deteriorate over time.
Yeah, maybe so.
It'll be $15 of shipping along with that 29-cent washer.
And that's the truth. Yeah, because I've got both, I've got my fuel gauge and my combo gauge, temperature and oil up at Nissinger's. So I'm
Okay.
kind of right in the middle of trying to figure out, okay, what do I do when I get it back?
Yeah,
That may just be that automatic bleeder.
Nissinger probably has those other washers if they're, you might ask them. They've got lots of spare parts.
That's a
Okay,
good point,
great.
Rick.
That's a good point. Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Yeah, you're right, because the shipping can kill you on things. Someone else have a point or a question?
Yes, I do. I'm Alden Bryan. I live in Williston, Vermont, which is near Burlington, and I just this spring purchased a VJ8.
Congratulations.
5, thank you. And I have a question about my transmission. It's a car that had been completely restored. And to make a long story short, it's running beautifully. Engine's been rebuilt. I don't know about the transmission. I suspect it has, but it's slipping out of fourth gear at times. I have there's no pattern to it, whether you're going downhill or whatever. You back off and it slips out and then doesn't do it. The only pattern I can find is that when it's warm, it doesn't do it as much as when it's cold. And so my first question is, what's the proper oil to run in a overdrive transmission?
Straight, non-detergent, 30 weight.
Okay. My fellow has put in 2050, the oil that I use in the engine, which is Penn grade 2050. Is
With the zinc, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Is that not good for a transmission, or do you know?
No, it's not.
I'm sorry?
No, it is not. Your
And what-
2050 oil is going to be, your 2050 Penn grade oil is a detergent motor oil. And the transmission and overdrive want 30 weight non-detergent oil. The reason being is the detergent in your oil actually keeps the particles and the dirt and the carbon and the crud in suspension until it gets to the oil filter, and the filter then takes it out. A transmission doesn't have an oil filter in it. So any little bits that get in the oil will continue to circulate inside the transmission for as long as you have that oil in there, if it's detergent oil. If it's non-detergent oil, which is what the Austin-Healey manual called for, the little bits, the little pieces of copper or brass off of your synchronizers and stuff like that will settle to the bottom, and they get caught in that filter or that magnet that sits on the bottom of the transmission at the plug where you can drain the transmission and overdrive.
So is that,
You want 30 weight non-detergent oil in there.
Okay, I understand that. That sounds sensible. Do you have any thoughts about the transmissions slipping out of fourth gear? It seems absolutely normal all the way along, but you let off on the accelerator, you're going down a hill, or sometimes on the flat, it slips out of fourth gear. Is there any thoughts on that?
The rule of thumb is that when it starts acting like that, it's probably the synchronizers in fourth gear are beginning to wear and go bad, and they're not allowing it to lock in tight enough.
And so is it hurt to keep driving it, or is it drive it until it gets worse or better or whatever?
I would just drive it until it gets worse, until the synchronizer is not working at all, and you're beginning to get a little grinding when you go into fourth gear, as the synchronizers are failing completely.
And what is it? You think it's the synchronizer that is likely to be pulling it out of fourth gear?
That's the rule of thumb. It could be something else. It could be that the little detent on the shift rod is not acting as it should. But the rule of thumb is that's what you normally would look for if your transmission is popping out of gear, particularly on the transition from accelerating to decelerating, going down a hill or something like that.
Does it make what difference which gear it is? I mean, any difference between third and fourth?
Usually it's the synchronizer on that particular gear. So if fourth gear is going bad, that's where it pops out. If it's a third gear synchronizer, that's where it pops out.
Okay,
But usually it's fourth gear. It just gets the wear from that all the time.
But most commonly it's when you're decelerating, correct?
yes, only when I'm decelerating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you decelerate, I just leave your hand on the shifter and keep it in gear.
Yeah, it doesn't do it all the time. I mean,
Well,
and after it gets warm, that is after I've driven a while, it seems to do less. So it's okay.
Will the change in oil sort of impact that at all?
I don't, who asked
well,
that
that
question?
was Alan asking, but
I'm asking
Bob, what's your
Abbott, really.
experience with the right oil?
Look, it may help if you put 30 weight, straight 30 weight non-detergent oil, it may help a lot. It's certainly worth it's 2.5 quarts of oil. So it's worth the $20 you're going to spend on oil to
Sure.
drain the transmission and put 30 weight oil in it, which is what it actually calls for and wants to have in it.
Okay, what do you think about running Penn Grade 2050 in the engine?
That's exactly right. That's
Okay.
the perfect oil for it. Anything, 2050 is the correct viscosity, and any oil that you can buy that has the ZDBP, the zinc content, is right. And Penn Grade does. Valvoline Racing Oil has it. There are probably some others on there. And these days, the can or bottle will say with ZDBP. But that you're running exactly the right motor oil. I
Yep.
just changed the transmission.
Yeah, the engine's running beautifully. I can't, and actually the car's driving beautifully. Everything except this just slips out occasionally.
Well, we don't know for sure whether the transmission was ever rebuilt.
I don't know,
Even
but
if-
I suspect there was so much money spent on this car, I suspect it was rebuilt and it may have been badly adjusted or something.
It could be, or at one time there were some bad synchronizers coming out.
Yeah,
So they weren't lasting very long. So even if the transmission was rebuilt X number of years ago, before you owned the car,
I don't think that the person who did all this work was owned a Manchester Motors in Manchester, Connecticut. And he was an older fellow and he loved these cars and he wanted to make a rally car. So that's what he did. And he rebuilt this whole thing and money seems to have been no object. Then he got ill and died. And the car sat 7 years with his wife finally decided to sell it. I don't think probably doesn't have over 1,000 or 2 miles on it since he rebuilt it. So probably the half the
Again.
problem is sitting.
well, it can't hurt to change the oil back to what.
I will have that done.
Yeah.
Okay.
See what happens, and then like Pete says, if it requires keeping your hand on the shifter every time you go down a hill and decelerate, it's because the transmission rebuild's not going to be inexpensive.
No, it's just getting it out of there is not cheap. But anyway, I thank you for your help and I'm new to the forum. And is it the protocol to send in questions ahead of time? Is that how that works?
Well, we prefer it that way, but again, we have a kind of an open forum tonight. We had 2 questions. Quite often we'll have 6 to 10 questions in advance. Tonight we had 2.
Where do you do watch for your announcement and then send them in? Is that how that works?
Yep. So to my email address, healeybn4@comcast.net.
Okay, and I get that from I get that from the literature that.
Yep. So it's on the email. It's also on the homepage to our website.
Right. Okay.
On the homepage for the website. Yep.
Well, I appreciate it very much. It's an interesting car. I have a Triumph TR3A 1957.
Good for you.
And it's a different car. The gearing seems a little odd to me. It seems to me like the gearing is a little low. But is that normal for these cars? Is that what you find? What do you think?
Well, do you have any idea what you have for a differential in the car?
No, and how do I know this? I know I get at 2,000 RPM with overdrive, I'm traveling 70 miles an hour.
Whoa.
No.
Does that sound normal?
No. No. Not at all. Do you think your so the 70 miles an hour, is that on your speedometer or are you tracking with a
Speedometer.
GPS?
With my speedometer, and this isn't checking, as far as I can tell, the RPMs are accurate and the odometer is accurate. I'm pretty sure the odometer is accurate because, you know, you go by these signs to say how fast you're going and that stuff. That's all very close. But
No, I would think at 70 miles an hour, you'd be turning $3,000 or more.
I'm not in overdrive.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to write that down. 70 miles per hour.
Well, again, it makes a difference. It makes a difference on what you have for a differential in the car. What a lot of people have done is they've put in a 3.5 differential that lowers it dramatically from the original of 3.9. So it lowers your RPMs. But, you know, so you'd really have to need to know what you have for differential in that car.
What's normal?
3.9.
3.9 is normal?
Yes, for a BJ8. Yep. If it was an earlier car, it'd be 4.1.
Okay, what do you have any other correlations between RPM and what I should see for speed?
I don't know. What do others think? I mean, they're all, any other recommendations, what you should be seeing at 70 miles an hour for RPMs?
Or give me what should I see for speed in fourth gear at 2000 RPM or anybody, whatever anybody knows?
Mine's on the dash. I'll go look.
I do about 2,500, 70 miles an hour to about 2,500 RPM.
With overdrive?
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe
2,500.
25, 28, somewhere on there.
Okay.
And Daryl, that's the original diff?
At 70 miles
As far as I know.
Yeah.
With overdrive.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're doing 70 at 2,000, that's pretty remarkable.
I could also have a, you know, I'm 84 years old. I could have a failure of memory here.
We all have those. Don't feel bad.
But low gear seems very low. I can almost start this car on a flat. I can start this car up really just using second gear.
Absolutely. The torque in these engines is great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I can go up a hill in overdrive in fourth gear that I'm amazed that I can do it.
Oh, it's got a lot of, well, you got a 6-cylinder compared to the 4-banger you have in your Triumph.
Right, right.
So it's a much torquier engine. And it's the same thing with on 100, even with because the 100s have a 2.6 liter, you know, where your Triumph is what, a 2 liter. So 100 will go, you can start them up in second gear all the time. Not a problem.
Well, in 2000 RPM in fourth, I get 33 without overdrive, 40 in overdrive.
Okay, so 2000 RPM in fourth without overdrive.
33.
Equals 33 miles an hour?
Roger, roger.
I'm sorry, say again?
Yes.
Roger, roger.
Fourth gear, 2000 RPM at 33 miles an hour?
That is correct.
Boy, that sounds to me like it should be faster than that.
It's not, and I get 40 when it's in overdrive.
40 with OD at 2000. That's entirely different. Now, maybe I have a tack that's wrong.
Again, so that place we talked about earlier, Nossinger's down in Long Island, New York, is the ones who who rebuild these instruments.
How do you spell it?
Nice, NISONGERS. But again,
SS.
so if you go onto our website into the members only section, the password is lowercase Healey. We have all those details in there.
Oh, thank you very much. And that's for gauges, right?
Yep.
All gauges, right?
Yep.
Well, good.
Yes.
I think one thing too is if he's had an electronic ignition put in it, then the original tack's not gonna be right.
That's true.
So.
Oh, really? Because that's what we just put a Petronix in it.
It's not gonna be right then.
Then you have to have you have to have the gauge, the tachometer converted.
We just solved the problem right there. You hit the nail on the head.
You have to take out the tachometer and send it out to be converted?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the reason then. Okay.
They'll
Let's
change
learn
it from
something
analog
new.
to digital.
Is that why my TAC is reading low then? Is that right?
Yep.
Now, in the interim, any smartphone, you can get an app for it that'll turn it into a TAC, a flashing thing that you can measure your RPM dead on.
Really?
Absolutely, it's wonderful. Any smartphone has one, and what it does is you crank in a number and it flashes that light on the smartphone at exactly that rate, and it'll just freeze that, freeze your crankshaft.
So you get that on the App Store?
Yeah, there's several of them for each of the phone types.
I didn't know that.
So I'm losing you a little bit. The app does what?
It flashes the light on your smartphone at an exact rate.
So it acts like a timing light?
Absolutely. So you hold
Okay.
it down, you set it for, the rate you want. Hold it down there and take a look at your crankshaft and run your tack up, and you'll see right where it locks up.
Okay, using like a timing light. I misunderstood you,
So
Kelly.
it's an app it's actually a timing light that it works off your smartphone.
Yeah, it just works off the clock in your phone.
Huh.
I didn't know that. That's good to know, Kelly.
Some of them are called vibrometers because people use them to find vibration, because if you got a vibration, you can set it to it and you'll see that vibration just stop as you get to the right rate.
That's good to know.
So it'll give you the RPM.
We need the problem is we don't have enough teenagers on this call to teach us about the cell phones.
That's true.
That's the real challenge. So
Well,
Kelly
Alan,
must have,
you're the youngest person here, so we're going to nominate you.
that's why we're all in trouble. Totally. And I'm a technology guy.
I
But
don't understand how it could act as a timing light if it's not connected to your ignition.
I'll try again. You set a number on the cell phone and it flashes the light at that exact rate.
But it's not going to tell you when number one cylinder fires.
Has nothing to do with number one cylinder. You just shine it on your crankshaft, and when that crankshaft stops turning in the flashing, it's turning at the same rate the light's flashing.
I gotcha. Yes, I see how that works. So you do it kind of backwards. It isn't reading the car. You're changing the car to read the flash. When the crank stops turning, that coincides with the flash, and then you look at your tach.
Roger that. You can set your throttle to something and then go out there and move the numbers around until it stops.
Yes.
They have up and down arrows on them.
Interesting.
It's still good to know about. It's excellent to know about. I mean, lots of times when you want to check a tack and say, well, wait a minute, is this thing high or low or whatever? So you can tell exactly what the engine's turning and then compare it with what the tack's reading. It's an excellent thing to know about.
Yeah, and I tell you, if you want to find out what your gear ratios are or what rear end you've got, it takes 5 minutes.
Nice to know about.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's good to know.
So I wanted to give an update. Last time I was having a stalling problem. Bert helped me, maybe put some oil in the dashpot and that stuff. I did change the coil.
Yeah.
And I'm good for now. So we'll
Great.
see how that goes. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I always carry spare coils. They're notorious for going bad.
Well, let's hope.
So, but it sounds like it solved the problem, Daryl.
So far, yeah. I'm venturing out a little further and further. I'm going to go on Friday. I'll take it for a big ride, and hopefully that'll solve the problem here. So,
So you put the new one in. Now, do you have a spare as well?
well, that's my next thing. I'm going to buy the spare.
Just leave it in the truck. That you can replace them so easily. I coming back from Rhode Island on 495 last year. Mine died on my 100, and in 15 minutes I had a new coil in there and ran home fine.
Right.
So.
And you did that repair on the side of the road on 495?
Yeah.
Oh, and you
Not a
survived. Good for you.
I did survive.
If you
Fortunately,
survive,
no one hit me.
again. Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah. It's dangerous.
I mean, the coil just died. Over about 5 miles. It progressively lost power, and then it wouldn't run at all. So I got out and I checked the rotor first, and then the rotor seemed fine. So I replaced the coil and started right up, and then went out and bought another replacement coil.
Is there a preferred coil vendor?
Well, they say Lucas on them.
That's the wrong answer, I think, but unless the Germans bought them. So is that what you're just replacing with the same kind of in-kind?
I do.
Moss,
But
that kind of thing?
And again, if you need a different coil if you're running electronic ignition. They're different coils if you run an electronic ignition compared to points. So just be cognizant of that.
Sure. I got one other question, if you can have a moment.
Sure.
Anybody have any experience with that switch that that doesn't let you?
The battery switch?
Well, it's a switch that works with the overdrive so that you cannot go back to normal. That is, take it out of overdrive unless your engine is accelerating. There's a switch on the firewall.
Okay.
Firewall and connected to the throttle pedal.
Yes, and what is that switch called?
It's called the throttle position switch.
Okay. And what I know there's a explanation in the manual about how to set that, but it doesn't seem to be entirely successful. Is there a way to check it, drive it, and to see that it's working right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, if we're trying to reset that switch, the switch wants to deactivate the circuit at about 1/4 to 1/3 of the way down.
Okay.
So there's a pinch bolt on the side of the switch where the shaft sticks out.
Yes, I
And
know
if you
about
loosen-
that.
if
And
you
there's a
loosen
clamp.
If you loosen the pinch bolt, all right, so you turn the shaft with a screwdriver and then put a test light on the white and purple wire and power, turn the overdrive on, and as you rotate the switch counterclockwise, all of a sudden the light will go out. And that's where you want to have that 3/4 of a quarter of a throttle dialed in.
Well, I
So-
remember that, and the mechanic has a hard time doing that. Is there any way to check it and fine tune it by driving the car?
Well, you can always do a fine adjustment driving the car, but I think you'll find that you can get it dialed in pretty darn good with a test light and just make sure that you have hold the throttle at 1/4 of the way down and then turn the shaft on the switch until the light goes out and then lock it in place right there without moving anything else. And it should be doing it right.
It's
Now-
actually working pretty well, but what happens is that when I let off on the throttle, and if I'm going slowly, I only do it when I'm going slowly, I let off on the throttle and it kicks out of overdrive when I think it should wait for me to push down on the throttle. In other words, it's going out of overdrive a little too quickly to protect the overdrive. Now I know how to drive it so that I don't damage, I don't make it do that. I make sure that I use either the clutch in order to make it a smooth transition, or
Yeah.
I add a little throttle and it kicks right in.
Kicks you out, you mean?
Well, in other words, if I add a little throttle as I'm switching to normal,
Yeah,
it works perfectly without any problem.
okay.
when I let off on the throttle and switch it, it should not go into normal, but it does after a hesitation. So it needs a little bit of adjustment.
Well, just try cranking this, you could just try to loosen the pitch bolt and move the shaft just a little teeny bit. But a lot of people, and we had this discussion a couple weeks ago, a lot of people always clutch when they go into overdrive or out of overdrive. I don't think you're going to cause any problem to your overdrive if it doesn't wait for the switch, or if the switch isn't what controls it, because that same overdrive was used in a number of different manufacturers' cars, and Healey was the only one that put that switch in there. You can have a Triumph TR6 with overdrive, and it doesn't have a switch. It just goes on the dash, on the switch on the dash, in and out as you flip the switch.
Yeah.
And Healey just didn't like it when his car jerked when it went out of overdrive, so they designed that switch and put it in. But Jag didn't use it. Triumph didn't use it. MG didn't use it. Only Healey used it. So,
Well, I certainly, on the Triumph, I use the clutch a lot, because when I put it into overdrive, it clunks, and I just prefer to use it and do it
and
smoothly.
a lot of people feel the same way. Pete will tell you he always uses his clutch to go
I
in
do.
and out of overdrive.
Yeah.
And a lot
Yep.
of people do. A lot of people on our call said that they always use the clutch.
I've on the Triumph, it's difficult, but on the Healey, I can almost adjust the throttle and make it smooth.
Well, that's good.
A little bit of acceleration when I put it into normal, a little back off on the accelerator when I put it in overdrive, and it just goes smoothly.
Well, again, these cars have a lot of their own idiosyncrasies. So, one car to the next may drive slightly different. So, I've got one of my Healeys that goes in and out overdrive beautifully. The other one's a little lazier. So it's just kind of the beast you live with.
The other option
its
is
idiosyncrasies.
The other option is obvious, to me at least, is drive the car down to Ipswich and have Bob Abbott's guys run it, fix it for you. That's the easiest answer. And we know you're new, so you don't know. I mean, you may not know that Bob runs a shop.
Well, I thank you for your advice, and it sounds like good advice.
Great.
Pleased to meet you.
Well, thanks for joining.
Hey, Alden, this is Bob Britton. I just wanted to mention you're up in Burlington area.
Yes, I live in Williston, which is just east of Burlington.
Right. Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the British Invasion in Stowe.
Yes.
Big car show. And if you go to that, you'll meet a lot of the members from the club.
I will do that. I will do
Love it,
that.
that
I guess
show.
they missed it last year,
So
didn't
hopefully-
they?
Yeah, they didn't have it
Yeah,
last
they did,
year.
but it's going to be held this year.
Good.
And I'm the contact person for that, and I'll be there. So I'll look forward to meeting you.
Well, I will look forward to being there. Is it going to be held in September?
Yes, it's the second weekend in September, and Vermont's, they more or less, I think, have lifted their restrictions for large gatherings like that.
Will it be on the mountain road there in Stowe?
Yep.
Or is it over now on the north side of town?
Well, no, it's in Stowe at the event field. Just go on to britishinvasion.com and you can register for it. And there's usually 40 to 50 Healeys at the show.
Well, I'll be sure to be there this year.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Great. Other questions tonight?
Can we go back to the coil for a minute? You said there's a different coil you use if you've got electronic ignition.
Yes.
Is there a designation on that?
Pertronics has a coil that goes with their electronic ignition.
Oh, so it should be a Petronics coil that I see. Okay, fine.
Yep.
Needs to be a 4-ohm coil rather than an 8-ohm coil.
4 ohm.
Thanks, Bob. I didn't know the
4 ohm,
difference.
You said 4 ohm?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So if you change to electronic ignition and you have an analog tach, it's going to make the tach move? without changing it to a digital tack?
The tack won't work when you turn it to electronic ignition, Alan.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to confirm, right?
Yes.
Because, yeah, I mean, you're going to switch because you have to switch the coil over, and the tack's connected to the coil. That's kind of how it works, right?
Yeah.
So because we were talking about Alden's problem, and he said his tack's working, right? I mean,
Well,
his
yes, it
numbers may not
works,
be
but it
right.
must not
But,
be
but
accurate.
it's go ahead.
My question is, if the tack's moving at all, with electronic ignition, when you switch that over, the tack will still move somewhat, just be wrong?
Norm shaking his head, yes.
Okay.
My
Yeah,
my tack works. It just apparently is not accurate.
No, yeah, and I get it. Or I mean, I heard what you said. That's why I was confused, because when I talked to Nissinger about doing my tack, he offered me to change it over to this. He said it's an analog tack, and we're going to put a circuit board in there, and then you can use it either way, right? But unless that's done, I didn't understand how how a digital tack would work for an analog system. But maybe it's, I mean,
They're both essentially digital. They're just different.
I wanted to ask about the tack with the Protronics again, because my BN1 came with the Protronics for the 10 years I've had it, and it has a Lucas sports coil on it. So it sounds like I'm at risk, or that's okay.
So Ted, what again, when I had converted to mine to Protronics, it was recommended that you had a Protronics coil to go with it.
Okay.
I have I've been running a Protronics probably for 15 years in my BJ7 with and I run a Lucas sports coil. I've never had a problem with it. Matter of fact, the only problem I had was when I bought the Protronics coil, and it crapped out on me. I put the sports coil back on, and it's been in there for 10 years. So
there you go.
Maybe the Lucas is a 4-ohm coil, like I think Bob mentioned. So
I don't know the ohms of it. It's just the standard coil that any of these early BJ Healey's run.
Yeah, interesting.
Anybody have experience with the Intermotor sport coils?
I've had some of those, Jim. Yeah, I've had, again.
No problem. Yeah.
No. I think they're
some of the Lucas ones you get now are whatever it is.
I think you're right, Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the last one I got, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I guess the possibilities are endless.
That's right.
Until you break down.
Right. So I'm just going to share my screen briefly. So Rick Neville posted this on our Facebook page. I realize not everyone has Facebook, but can you see my website? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So I've just posted again in the members only section. Rick found this great website for Austin-Healey values. And then, so I got it out there on the website. So it has, you can see all the different model years, and then it has all these subcategories between like BT7s and BN7s and whatnot. But it's a very interesting website. So I've got it out on our website with where you can look at very combinations of sprites and big Healeys, and it has each of the it has the auction sites, and they are current and up to date. So like Bring a Trailer as an example, it has the auctions that are running right now on Bring a Trailer and what the prices are for the various cars, and it calculates an average. So it's something that I thought people might be aware of. Again, Rick posted this on our Facebook page last week, and I picked up on it, and I posted it both here on our New England website, and I posted it on the national website as well. I was really impressed with this website. So it has both US prices and some of the cars in the UK as well.
So Pete, what's the source? Who's doing the number crunching?
Well, it was let me
I'll go out and take a look at it. I thought.
Yeah, it's I don't. Rick, are you still on? Do you know where you had found that?
No.
So it's classic.com is is the site. So it has all multiple cars, but it had one just for Healey's, but it will do any classic cars. So it's classic.com.
Okay, I'll check out.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it.
It'll be
So-
interesting to see how close that is to Haggerty.
I didn't do a comparison on that, Nick.
You know, it'd be interesting to see how close
Yeah.
they are.
Well,
You know,
Haggerty doesn't, supposedly Haggerty gets their numbers from what people value their car at. So if
Okay.
you insure your car for, you know, $50,000 and it's a bug eye, their rating is going to show higher than the cars actually sell for.
Got it.
Haggerty also uses sale prices, but they also use what people are insuring their car for.
Well, they are an insurance company.
They are.
That's true. And obviously we had that call with Rob Dexter several months ago where unfortunately he was underinsured in his car and ended up losing it. So it's important that you keep the value of and it's important also to use classic car insurance. Don't, get insurance from your local, your daily driver. You should be actually having stated value on your classic car insurance. And unfortunately, Rob found out the hard way. So, other questions or thoughts people would like to discuss tonight?
I've got a quick question about my gas gauge, which isn't working. Went into the trunk and went in to look at the sender, but it's coated over. I'm a little bit anxious about trying to peel the area in the gas tank where the sender is.
Yep.
What should I be doing there? Should I remove it myself and replace the sender and then seal it back up? And what do I seal it with?
Well, it just has a gasket. There's, I think, 8 screws that hold it into the top of the gas tank there. And there is a cork gasket that goes in there. It really shouldn't be sealed per se, Daryl, with some sort of sealant.
Whoever did it last time, I think they coated it over with some kind of epoxy, it looks like. So I could just peel that off and get right in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Now, that doesn't mean that's what your problem is. It could be your gauge itself, Daryl.
I'll start with the sender, and if that doesn't fix it, I'll go to the gauge. Does that make sense? I mean, it does. Yep. Yeah.
Make sure that your ground is you have a good connection there too. So yeah, I mean, historically Healey gas gauges are atrocious. So it's the stick is the best one you can use.
Right.
That's when you really know how much gas you have, when you put it down the stick right down there.
Yeah.
So
would people coat that? Would they coat it to keep the gas smell out of the trunk? I mean,
who knows? It didn't look right to me. It was looked like they put in the sender, then they put some epoxy over it, like really sealed it in there. And it wasn't clear to me if, what I should be doing, but I think I'll just peel off whatever that covering is, get in there, replace the sender, get the gaskets, make sure it's sealed properly, and see how that works.
Guys, does anyone have the numbers of what the resistance should be on that sensor? Because if you do, you can just stick an ohm meter on it and see where you're at.
I don't. Does anyone more with electronic expertise know what the ohm should be on the sending unit? Sorry, Kelly, I do not.
Next time I'm in there, I'll take a look at them, but it'd be nice to know what the ohms ought to be on that, and then you'd know where it ought to be.
I could add a little bit on when I got my car had been sitting for many years and the whole thing just didn't work. So I took the sender out and it was frozen. And I lubricated it with penetrating oil, freed it up and held it and, tested it, and everything worked fine. I put it back with a new gasket and seal it, and I'm using the old one and it works fine now. But it's very delicate. You have to handle it very carefully.
Yep.
But it's important not have a leak back there with the battery back there and everything covered up. If you get a leak in there and don't know it, it could be a bad situation.
Well, I think that's why they sealed it with
Yeah.
whatever the seal is.
And Moss sells a sealant, and it sells gaskets, and it sells new senders and all of that, even the screws.
Yep.
But I didn't, my old one worked, so I just put that in.
That's the best, best solution.
Thank you,
So,
folks. Been nice to talk to you. I've got to sign off now.
Okay, nice talking with you. Hope to see you again next. So it's the second Monday of each month at 7 p.m.
So sorry, Alden. Sorry, Alden. Alden, this is Mariano. I'm like 30 years behind you. Do you have any tip how to keep the passion at 84 like that? Where we can buy that in Moss, or any advice?
No, just have too many cars. They keep you young worrying about.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mariano.
Okay. So long.
Okay. Well, any other thing, Rick, anything you'd like to add?
I would. First of all, I would add that, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Pete, to give a little summary of what's going on with Summit. I think that's important to let our members know what's happening. So go ahead.
Yep. So Summit's going to be the third week in September. I did send out a reminder out to everyone who had registered and those who, to members. We're up to 74 registrations. We are very confident that we will have a safe event in Newport. So the third week in September, we've got a large contingent coming down from Canada. We've got over 10 cars coming down from Canada. We've got about a dozen cars coming up from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. We've got cars coming from as far away as the Carolinas. We've got 3 cars coming up from North Carolina. We've got 4 cars coming in from Ohio. So it's, again, the third week in September, and we're going to have the opportunity where Donald Osborne, who's the CEO of the Audrain Museum, will be our special guest at the car show on Wednesday of that day. And then Wednesday afternoon, he'll be our host at the Audrain Museum. On Tuesday, we'll be at the Newport Car Museum. So it's amazing. There are 2 just incredibly outstanding museums in the Newport area. And we'll get a chance to do both of those. We've got a great rally planned all around Newport, and you got the mansion tours for those folks who want to go out on the into Narragansett Bay. There's tours out there. We will be on Monday evening at the Newport Playhouse for dinner theater. So please feel free to check it out. It's on our website again under Summit 2021, and it's Healy's at Newport. So we're really excited about that, and look forward to seeing, I know a lot of people where 2020 was all, everyone was not able to travel, and we had to cancel the event last year. So we're looking forward to it for this year. So anyone have any questions or comments regarding that?
Just an anecdote, Pete. I met Donald Osborne here in Stratford like a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
I was making a news for a Jay Leno program, and we share that he's going to the Mille Miglia. So I hope that I will meet him in the Mille Miglia next month.
Excellent.
He ran it like 6 times. He's going with the Cis Italia. Great guy.
Nice.
Great.
Good.
Guy.
Yeah. I had a chance to spend some time with him last Sunday at Fort Adams. So yeah, and he's really looking forward to spending the day with us on that Wednesday of Summit. So
The other thing I wanted to mention, Peter, is that people have asked me who that picture is behind me. And some people guessed it was Bob Britton, but it's not. It's actually Captain Edward Smith, and that's his little boat over there called the Titanic. And he went down with it. And when I became president of this club, I said that's the one thing I didn't want to do, was go down with the ship. And if you take a look at our calendar, we have a real lack of events this year. And we had an event planning call last week, and we only got 6 people that were interested enough to call in. We really need some people to come forward and help their wing leaders plan an event or actually plan one of their own. It can be as simple as taking a ride and bringing people around. But if we don't have people planning these events, we're not going to have places to go to drive together. So that's my pitch. Make it often, but you know, we can't subsist as a Zoom club or having one event a year called the Summit. And you know, your wing leaders are listed on our website, and they'll be happy to help you along. You can call me if you want some help in planning an event, and I can give you some advice. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be a summit-like event. It can be just a ride to go get ice cream together with people in your area, or go to a museum, or go to anything. But, you know, it's the perfect time for us to get out and drive our cars. We've been holed up for a year and get a chance to see each other. So, you know, keep that in mind, and please, you know, try to think of something that you can do for your club.
Yeah, and if you have ideas, please also make sure you let me know. I'm maintaining the calendar, so I am sharing that on my screen right now. Again, it is on our website. So you can see the events there, or you can download it. So whenever anyone has a new event, just send me an email on that, and I'll make sure to get that posted and updated to keep it current. So this is right on the website under the 2021 event calendar.
Peter, you better check the time for the Lars Anderson British Card Days at 7 p.m. Seems a little late to have a British Card Day.
Well, it's not 7 p.m. If you're right, I will correct that. So it's at 10 a.m.
Okay, good.
Yep. Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Any others?
Hey, this is Rupert Richardson. I may challenge Alan for the youngest member of the club.
Good for you.
I also been a club member for almost 25 years, I think. So anyway, I was working on my BJ8, and I was wondering if you guys could help me. I need to replace one of the rear studs, one of the studs that holds the rear hub on. And it looks up from the Moss catalog, just like it's splined rather than threaded. But I was just wanting to get some advice on how to get the rear, one of the studs out of the back there.
Anyone have any experience with removing those studs? I don't.
Torch.
But they're going to have to be pressed out, aren't they?
I'm not sure.
I think you're going to need I think you're going to need to take it to a place with a press.
A press.
I think they're peened over on the back. On the 100 there.
Are they, Ted? Okay.
I know they are in the 100, yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes what I thought was going to be an easy. I was just rebuilding the brakes, and anyway, one of the thread spots has been messed up. So I'm just hoping to push it out, but that's fine.
So do you have Rupert, do you have a tap and die set? Can you try and rethread it?
I do. Yeah, I'm going to try that next.
Yeah.
That'll be the next thing rather than replace it. So, okay.
Yep.
Try to ground off the back and the back of that plate, you know, smooth that off, see if you can get it out that way, and then pull it out.
That's true. Yep. I will give that a try as well.
Can you put a nut on it? And
I'm
then
sorry?
hang it from the inside, from the outside, put another socket on the inside of the hub to catch the nut, the bolt coming out. It should be right out. It's pressed in there, but you can get it out with a hammer.
Okay.
Get a 4-pound sledge, but put the nut back on the stud.
Yep. Yeah.
You don't want to damage the thread.
Take those things out. Back in the 60s and 70s, that's the way we always took them out.
Really, Randy? So just with a 4-pound sledge?
They all came out that way. But we always put a socket, an impact socket, back side to catch it. Obviously larger than the head itself.
Got it. Makes sense.
That was just
So Randy, it doesn't need to be pressed in and out?
No, they'll pull themselves in when you put when you put a zap gun on them.
Okay.
Yeah, but when you're banging on the nut, aren't you banging on the axle as well?
No. All you're doing, actually, all you're doing is driving that pin right out.
Yeah, I know, but the pin is hooked to the hub of the axle, right?
Well, it's not the axle, it's Dave, just hooked to the hub.
It's
Oh,
the
the
hub.
hub.
It's just a flat surface.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is holding that surface flat with the impact on the back end and just banging it straight down. As long as it's going straight down, it's just going to go one place, down.
Down. Okay.
Well, but right now, Rupert, do you have the hub on the car?
It is at the moment. Yes.
Yeah.
That'll be the next step. So, and then maybe just one more question, if that's okay. Taking the rear cylinders off, it seems like there are two metal pieces in the back, two metal sort of tabs. Is there an easy way to do that? I've watched YouTube, got an idea of roughly how it works, but I thought I'd ask the wisdom here if there was an easy way to take those tabs off.
So again, you're talking about the wheel cylinders, right?
Correct. The rear wheel cylinders. This looks like it's two metal tabs in the back that hold it in. Is that right?
You can get those out, and again, this is on your BJ8.
BJ8, yes.
I mean, I know on Sprites you can get them out without having to take those tabs off. You can fit them into that position. I'm not sure on a BJ8 or a BJ7.
No, the tabs do come off. Take a
Do they?
screwdriver, tap on them. They'll
Just
come off.
tap. Okay.
Tap like to the side, right on
Yep.
out.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't
Usually the
approached
top
that
one
yet.
first, and then there'll be enough room just to pull the other one out by hand.
Okay. Fantastic. I will. I spent the last week doing all the flexible hoses underneath the car and in the front. So wheel cylinders in the back and next. So that's very useful. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome, Rupert. Thanks for joining us. So, okay, well, thank you guys all for joining us tonight. Again, so our call will be again the second Monday. So that makes it, I think it's the 14th of June. And we'll look forward to talking to you guys then. And again, if you have any questions in advance, please send me an email at HealyBN4@comcast.net. So have a good evening. Let's get out and use these cars. So as Rick mentioned, if you got some ideas for events, please let us know.
Good. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Good night.
Peter.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rick.